Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Angry Birds Movie. The Angry Birds Movie is a bright, colorful, typical kind of kids animated movie. It almost is so perfect in that it feels like it's made by somebody in marketing or by a bunch of studio executives, and it has that kind of soulless kind of like going to the movies because it was a rainy day and not really forgetting about your troubles but just finding something to do, and then 20 years ago be like, what did we see? And probably guessing the wrong movie and saying, I'm pretty sure we saw Neighbors too. There's a lot of that in the Angry Birds movie, but also I think the Angry Birds movie and Rovio Entertainment, it feels like they want to sell more Angry Birds toys, they want more people to buy the apps on their smartphones, they want all that, but they also really care as well. It definitely feels very corporate, it definitely feels very manipulated, like this is all part of their big corporate overlord game plan, but they also really want the animation to be good, they really want the end battle sequence to be very visually impressive. It's a lot more ambitious than like something like Ratchet and Clank. They put a lot of money in this movie and it really shows. It's really a studio pushing it as far as they can with absolutely having no real personality. It just feels almost so within that bright, colorful, animated kids movie thing. It's not really breathing from that. It just is that. It's just fine about it. It's not terrible. It's not good. It's just kind of real middle brow, but middle brow in a way that a studio executive poured their heart and soul into, and it just kind of came out all like this. Red, who's voiced by Jason Sudeikis. Red has always had anger issues and has an anger management problem, so he is sentenced by a judge to go to anger management classes, and there he meets his friends Bomb and Chuck, even though he's not very nice to them, and then these pigs come to Bird Island, who have come from Piggy Island, and they come offering gifts and doing all these new customs and being very nice, and all the birds love them except for Red, who doesn't really even like the birds and is generally an angry person, but he definitely does not trust these pigs and wonders about their ulterior motives and what exactly they're up to, and eventually finds out about their evil scheme and tries to stop it, even going to find the legendary Mighty Eagle to hopefully stop these pigs from going about their evil plan. The animation in this is actually fairly well done. There are certain segments of this that I actually found very impressive, particularly the opening where Red's going through the forest to kind of get to this birthday party, and it's a really impressive sequence. Oh, I probably maybe should have seen this in 3D. If someone asked me, I'd probably be like, why not? You know, it's probably semi better in 3D, and they go, is it that better? And I go, I mean, I don't care enough, but that one sequence was cool. And then they had a sequence where Chuck, who has been stopped by a cop, he can run incredibly quickly, and he's stopped by the bird cop or whatever, and while the bird cop is writing a ticket, he runs and does all these like nefarious things to the cop with his wallet and runs around and does all this crazy shit. I thought that was pretty funny, and there's even like a kind of joke on time-lapse footage when they're trying to go to the Mighty Eagle, and a bomb kind of hurts his leg and lays down, and you see this time-lapse and like them moving with the time-lapse, which I actually thought was actually fairly creative. And they have certain parts like that, but they're very few and far between. There are not enough of them for me to actually like this movie or be that into it. It was just like nice little parts, and it does show like maybe a future for these two directors, Clay Cathis and Friegel Riley. One was a storyboard artist, the other was an animation director at Disney. Rovio definitely, I think, actually shows that they could actually make animated features if they wanted to, because this was actually fairly impressive on a very technical level. I don't think the character designs are that inspired or anything. They're good for what they had to work with. It does kind of have a certain sense that they really technically wanted this to look as great as it could, and if you look at the end action sequence, that I was surprised how strong visually it really was. This isn't like Ratchet and Clank. Certainly the budget is like several times what the Ratchet and Clank movie is, and it kind of felt in terms of quality about the same, where it's like some cartoon that when I was a kid I would just watch between two other cartoons I liked, and this felt like one that I might like marginally more than Ratchet and Clank, but not marginally more of enough to really care. It's like caring about something like 2% more. Is that a triumph? Like caring about two things equally, but you're also very apathetic about them. I know people keep bringing up that ever since the Lego movie, they're making movies out of everything now because every property or IP could be a movie. I don't actually want to put Angry Birds in that. I think that's a weird line to draw, because to me, the Angry Birds Birds movie is a video game movie, and I know it's one of the very first movies based on a smartphone app. I think that's relatively new, and that's probably going to be the new thing people groan about. You know, you'd always hear, but like, they made a movie based on a video game. Now they're going to be like, they made a movie based on an app. It's like a rotating circle of nonsense of people getting mad at things being adapted from things, because it really doesn't matter what it's adapted to. It matters what the movie actually is. It could be based on the gum on my shoe. It doesn't really matter. It matters what the movie is. But Gum on My Shoe is actually a good movie. I think more people should see it. But it really doesn't matter as much. I don't know why so many people are against that sort of thing, but this is a big year for video game movies, and I think this kind of treats it like a mainstream movie. It treats it like a big blockbuster type of film, which is definitely something that's a slight step forward for video game movies, but I think the thing that's holding it back is we haven't had a real filmmaker's touch for a video game movie. We have the company that's made the game behind it, and that's certainly good, but it just feels like an extension of that and not a very impressive film. I think they did the best job they really could expanding this brand as much as they could, having the corporate overlords of their studio pushing this as far as they possibly can. It works within that kind of very corporate animated film type of way, but we're not getting a good filmmaker sinking their teeth into a video game movie, and I think that's something the genre as a whole really needs. While I was watching this movie, I kept thinking, this is fine for what it is, but we need more of that. We need an auteur or somebody who knows how to bring more film language to a video game movie, because it doesn't matter that this is a game just about like putting birds in slingshots and shooting them off. If you had a good enough of a filmmaker and a good enough of a screenwriter, you could have made it into something, and that seems to be a continuing problem with video game movies, especially with the video game publishers making the movies. Film, and especially like big blockbuster type films, need more of an auteur. Not that I think this Martin Scorsese was going to make the Angry Birds movie, but I think as for this kind of genre or weird subgenre or type of movie, that's something I keep noticing, is that there's not really a real filmmaker getting into that, especially with these developers being involved. We'll see if that's true for Assassin's Creed and Warcraft, but so far between the two animated ones, Ratchet and Clank and Angry Birds, that certainly does seem to be a problem. This was written by John Vitti, who, although was a writer on King of the Hill, The Office, The Simpsons, and The Critic, and some fairly classic and good episodes of all of those shows, he also wrote the first two Alvin and the Chipmunk movies, and this feels more like a hack job than anything. Most of the jokes aren't really that funny. The visual parts I like. Those are pretty much the only parts I like. I didn't like the smarmy kind of Jason Sudeikis performance at all. I don't like that kind of Jason Sudeikis character who's always like smart alecky and stuff. It doesn't work as well as someone like a Chevy Chase or a Bill Murray can. I feel like people think he is that good, but I seriously disagree. I like Danny McBride, and it was interesting that Sean Penn is in this, mostly grunting and stuff, and that's not a diss at Sean Penn, that's mostly what he's doing. It was just odd that he's in the Angry Birds movie. And a lot of people that were credited I didn't hear, although I'm fairly sure Tony Hale recorded 2 lines, and they just repeated them throughout this movie because that's mime or something. It did overload it with jokes in a certainly a very insecure way that didn't exactly work. I hate that when kids movies overload it with jokes and they're not even like really good jokes. They just do kind of like the bottom of the barrel, lowest common denominator kind of kids movie jokes. This is probably one of the first bigger video game movies to come out this year, 2016 potentially being a big year for video game movies, and I don't think it really pushes the genre that much forward. It just kind of shows, oh yes, you can make a big corporate Hollywood animated movie out of a video game property. Congrats. But just making a movie that's as good as any of those Ice Age movies, I assume, because I never saw them, is not that much of a triumph. It's just kind of like, okay, fine, is just what I felt through the Angry Birds. It got a little more than that a couple of times, but not enough that I'd really want to recommend or really talk about this movie more than in the financial sense, or to talk about more if we'll possibly get a Candy Crush movie or an Emoji movie or something like that. That's the only real reason to talk about this, and this movie really didn't warrant discussion outside of that. It's just kind of a big corporate movie made in a very big corporate way, and it stunk of that the whole time. I'm not saying that every big expensive Hollywood movie should be called out on its corporateness, but sometimes it just feels so bland and market tested that there's really just no other explanation for it. There's no real personality to these filmmakers or this writer. It just felt like a normal big budget kids film, and one much like the Squeakquel that we'll all joke about and laugh about ironically, but maybe the Angry Birds movie isn't even really that embarrassing to even do those jokes about, making it a bland forgettable thing that we can launch into a catapult halt and shoot off into the ever recesses of summer movie past and completely forget about and hopefully have better video game movies in the future. But until then, I guess we just have to deal with this, and hopefully we can all move on, but I'm pretty sure we all will. So if you have seen the Angry Birds movie and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.